In fact, evangelization is almost non-existent. And it's sad. I've lived in Japan. I worked in Japan. I know a few things about Japan. I'm not Japanese, but I do know that many, many Japanese are suffering from either depression, spiritual, I guess, a lack of spirituality, especially with God. There's a lot of suicide. I witnessed several suicides myself in Japan. And it's all because God really is not present in their life. Tonight, you will learn from our panel of guests. So I want to apologize, first off. You're going to learn a lot tonight. It's going to be a crash course of history, of Catholic history in Japan, military history in Japan. So us men who love ninjas and shoguns and samurais, you're going to get your fill tonight. Okay? But also, you're going to get your fill tonight of culture, what we can do in Japan, and also you will learn from our star guest, which is Yoko Kamon from Japan, Tokyo, Japan. She's got so many things to say, but we do have very little time to do it in.
Yes, those things are.
We're gracious to Father for letting us do this event. We thank you, Father. By the way, I got a big gift. In fact, I want to give Father a gift right now. I know it's not iconography, Father. Okay, but there is a frame over there with Justo Takayama. Father, that's yours. Thank you. We appreciate you. I want to tell you something really quick. When I finally got the idea of this, it was during the consecration at Mass. And I said, God, why? Why me? Why are you choosing me again? And I said, but who's going to help me out with this? Where am I going to find the venue in such short notice? Well, the first person I picked was Father. And Father graciously said yes. He was amazing. And I'm sorry, Father, we weren't always in connection, but as you can see, we were so busy writing our speeches and getting these people ready to give you guys a good lecture tonight regarding Catholicism in Japan. Now, for me, my name is John Andrew Sustaita. I like to call myself a bumbling artist for God, because I'm telling you right now, God has worked incredible miracles in my life regarding art. From teaching in Japan, from my artwork being in the Vatican, all over Rome, all over Asia. So I had no idea that this was ever going to happen, to tell you the truth. Just like tonight, I had no idea it was going to happen, and it happened in less than 3.5 weeks. So, Justo Takayama, the guy up here, his painting, my painting, which is now in the Vatican, has been actually called one of the forefront paintings for this gentleman, who again is only lacking one more miracle. Once that happens, it's going to transform Japan, because Justo Takayama is not only known in the Catholic world, but he's actually known as a historical figure in Japan. He's very prominent in movies. He's very prominent in Japanese anime and Japanese video games. This guy, I believe, will help transform and bring souls to Christ. Because once Japan puts it all over their media on this man, people are gonna know about him. They're gonna say, wait a minute, this guy has always been posed to me as a villain to Japanese customs, to policies and politics. So how is the church in Rome, who is known by Japanese as a love-giving institution, why are they celebrating this man who's a villain? At that moment, I sense that that's a specific opportunity to help evangelize. Because then, they're going to start to ask questions. The real serious questions regarding Justo Takayama. To me, it's an incredible, I really do see it, living there and seeing the reaction of Huso Takayama with regular Japanese people in my painting, that there is potential. And tonight, guys, I want to ask your help, however you can. We are looking for guys that are skilled in media. We're looking for guys that know how to advertise, market, talk, how to bring people together. So there's a lot of mission work that is needed in Japan. Now, these gentlemen are going to talk because we all, and lady, is because we all share something in common. We all love Christ. We all love things that are Japanese as well. Okay? A lot of men here, I know, grew up in the 80s and watched, I don't know, Karate Kid, anything Japanese, Godzilla. I was one of those guys. I grew up here in Irving, Texas. And in Irving, Texas, I ran home every day after school to watch the very first Japanese anime to hit television airwaves, which was Starship, or what was it? Help somebody, Star Blazers. Yes. Yamamoto. Who said that?
Yeah.
Yamamoto. Yeah. So I watched that growing up. I had no idea that it was Japanese, but we loved it. We knew it was different. And so the Japanese people are different, and they're beautiful people too. But there's just one thing about it. There's just a spiritual desert. They've got wonderful, beautiful cultures, good tasting food. And I'm from Texas, I like my beef. But when I hit Japan and I hit those ramen shops, or ramen shops, sushi shops, I changed my direction with food. Like you would, I would not be able to wear this, to tell you the truth. So, I'd like to call up our first speaker, and that's Nick Stevens. Nick Stevens is Catholic. We met, and we actually started sharing a lot of interesting things that we had in common about Japan. Nick Stevens is a Catholic blogger, Catholic writer, and just a good friend. And a spiritual guy. He's a father, he's a husband, and he's just a great guy. So I'd like to invite him up here to give his speech. Nick Stevens, everyone.
Hey, thank you so much. Sorry, get this picked up here. Can everyone hear me well? Gosh, you know, I when you were up here talking, I was just thinking about the first time that we met, which wasn't that long ago, at an event, and gosh, you really just you fire people up, and it's awesome. It's so lovely to hear someone that's on fire for the Lord and has some ways to communicate to people that really, you know, light us up. I appreciate that about you. Thank you so much for planning this, and thanks so much for getting me involved. Thank you, thank you. Thank you all for showing up. It's humbling that so many people show up on a Friday night to speak with, just to hear about what we have to say. I didn't expect this. This is really amazing. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about what's going on presently in Japan. I won't dive as much into the history of things, but I want to give you a little taste of kind of life in Japan, what some of the problems are, and what I think a solution is. You'll be able to guess what that is already after hearing John speak. But yeah, I agree. The Japanese people are incredible people. I'm a big history buff, and so, you know, I know about how the Japanese went from basically a medieval society to an industrial one in 50 years during the Meiji Restoration. You know, I know that they're an incredible people. They're one of the world's most famous societies and cultures. They truly are a remarkable group of people. And that's something that, as a historian who loves history and was really fascinated with Japanese people, when John and I met up, that was something that I was like, oh man, yeah, these are great people. They are so lovely and so amazing. Why aren't they Catholics? Why aren't they Catholics, right? And so, as I got into that question and started to answer that question, I discovered some things about why they're not Catholic that's, you know, that hurts a little bit. And so if you look at the present situation right now in Japan, it's a modern country. This is one of the good things about it, I suppose you could say. It's a modern country. It's developed. It's got all the amenities. They've got everything to live with.
but it seems to me they have nothing to live for in many ways. And they have a wonderfully high life expectancy. They've got an industrialized country. Some people go there and they come back and they say, gosh, it seems like they're in the future compared to where we're at. And it's true. They kind of are. They kind of are in the future. And for that, it's very remarkable. It's a peaceful country. You know, thank God they haven't been at war for a very long time. And they have low crime. And they've got a unified society and a unified culture. In fact, immigration is very low there. They have almost no immigration. And so they don't have a lot of the ethnic strife that many countries across the world do. And that makes it a wonderful place for people to live. But the thing is, once again, it's like they've got everything to live with, but nothing to live for in some ways. So some of the bad about Japan is there is that spiritual crisis. And it's a little kind of similar to what we see in some of these Western post-Christian countries, as people like to call them nowadays, where it's very secular, and people have fallen away from the church and the faith. Well, Japan never really came to it, so it's slightly different in that respect. But they still have that secular crisis and that crisis of affluence, I would say, where they're so affluent it's almost a problem. It's like when you eat yourself to death almost, or too much of a good thing, perhaps. You mentioned and highlighted the suicide rate. I'll tell you what it is. It's 17.3 out of 100,000 people last year, which is quite high. Not the highest in the world, but staggeringly high. Top 20 at least of countries in the world. And in fact, there's even a forest that's kind of famous for that, and it's at the base of Mount Fuji, and it's in Japanese, so you might have to remind me what it's called. But they have a place where it's famous for people to go and end their lives, unfortunately. And suicide is somewhat accepted there compared to other countries, especially in the West. And that's heartbreaking. We see loneliness that's quite high in Japan as well. We see an economy that is putting a strain on their people. A little quick side note here on the economy. The Japanese people have suffered through what they call the Asian financial crisis in the 1990s. And in some sense, they never really recovered from that. And it would have been kind of like going through 2008 financial crisis here, and we never kind of came out of it. The Japanese economy is really the same size today that it was in 2002. That's put a big strain, especially on young people. Could you imagine being in a country where the opportunities were limited and it would be difficult to afford a house and to, in turn, raise a family? It's also very urbanized, and so the housing stock is in an urban environment where raising children is challenging. So is it any surprise that the Japanese population is basically in demographic freefall, right? And you're talking about a birth rate of anywhere from 1.23 to 1.36 per children per woman, right? This is well below the 2.1 replacement rate that a country would just need to stay stable. You look at the Japanese population pyramid, it's actually an inverted pyramid, so I don't even know what you call that. But it's not a pyramid anymore, it's kind of done this. And that's kind of put them in a bit of a spiral, right? They've had a challenging time. That makes it challenging to get the kind of growth you need for young people to have the economic opportunities. And plus, you might have to take care of some elderly people in your family, and that puts a strain on you. Now, to their credit, they've got more commonly there you see employment that is lifelong or quite long term, and there's duties between employers and employees, and that's a wonderful thing. At the same time, the double-edged sword to that is that the Japanese are actually known for working quite long hours. In fact, there's a word for it. Karayoshi, I think, is the name of it, where unfortunately there's some people that work so much that they've... am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Karayoshi? Yeah. It's a kind of a term in Japan that's famous for there, where people have worked so hard they've died. And, it's a real thing. It's a beautiful culture, but at the same time, it can be a little isolating. It can be a little stern in Japan, and it can be tough. Now, you could say that they have a religion, I guess, with this blend of Shintoism and Buddhism, but it's kind of a mix of ancestor worship and some superstitions, right? Yeah, and it's quite common there, but it's not quite a religion like we'd think of with Catholicism. It's a little different than that, and it's been difficult for people to step out of that and become Catholics, and be able to maintain their relationships in their families and among their friends. So that's a bit of a roadblock for evangelization. I would say that Japan is fertile soil for the Catholic faith. It's a field ready to sow. And this is my assertion to you all today, that the field's ready to sow and we need harvesters. We need harvesters to help. We need people to take the call. And maybe that's why some of you are here tonight. If you could go home tonight after this and ponder and pray upon that, we would have greatly appreciated it. If you would ask for the intercession of Blessed Takayama, I think that would be wonderful as well. For your own life and for your own mission and in what you're supposed to do in the body, but also for Japan. I want you to go home tonight and I want you to ask for the intercession of Blessed Takayama for that soil in Japan, that it becomes even more ready and that the harvesters come and they plant. Sorry, the sowers come and they plant. The harvesters might be later. We'll see when they show up. But got to get my farming references down better. I'm from Nebraska too. I should know better. Anyways, how am I doing on time? Are we good?
Yeah.
Am I right on it?
Yeah.
Okay. I just ran one up here, so we're doing good. Anyways, I really think that redepicting Blessed Takayama to the Japanese people is one of the most important ways that we can reach Japanese people, and in turn that they and Blessed Takayama is going to point them to the most important thing, which is Christ Himself. So with that, I just want to thank you all again for letting me speak. Go home tonight, ponder, pray, ask for Blessed Takayama's intercession. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. I just want to invite everybody that's coming in. Thank you guys for coming. You guys just barely got here. We saw you come in. So, as you heard Nick, there is certainly a call. I heard my call with Art, and I was extremely blessed with meeting, and there he is, Cardinal Maeda of Osaka, Japan. I am actually wearing his baseball team's cap, which is the Hanshin Tigers, and we traded. He's now a Texas Rangers fan. And so he's actually seeing this. We're actually videoing it, and we're sending it to him. So, Cardinal, here's your hat. Hanshin Tigers, all the way. All right. Now, our next speaker is a guy that does, what was that again? Taekwondo. I get Kempo, Ninjutsu, and all that other stuff all mixed up. So, Taylor Kelly has a dojo in Grand Prairie, Texas. And he teaches his students Catholicism and the ways of the martial arts at his dojo. And he says that Blessed Huso Takayama has inspired him to start evangelizing to his students. So let's welcome Taylor Kelly.
Thank you, John. All right. Okay, cool. I can protect my voice. I teach kids, so I'll protect my voice. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Kelly. I'm here to talk to you guys today, not really about historical Takayama, but my encounter with him. John wanted me to talk about that. So To give you guys some context, I actually wasn't raised Catholic. I was raised in a non-denominational home. That is until my uncle came from Rome, gave my family rosaries blessed by St. Pope John Paul II, and which is awesome. It's incredible. And that same week, I had a dream about kneeling in a church. My mother, who was from Manila, she came. She left her faith when she moved to the United States, and she wanted to suddenly become Catholic again. My father, who was reluctant at first, met the RCIA director, who happened to look just like his mom, who passed away. And that's what brought us to the faith. Now, at the same time, and I got accepted into the church at the age of 11, same age as Takayama, so that kind of also drew me to him as well. When I say I lived in the dojo, I mean I literally lived there. So my parents would drop me off for class at 4 o'clock, and by the way, I was 5 years old when I started training martial arts, and wouldn't pick me up till 9 because they forgot to pick me up. It's because I was a handful. They just needed me to do something all day. So they dropped me off 5 days a week. So I literally lived doing martial arts. Like, that's what I did. However, as I got older and I started to go into college, I started to drift away from my faith. I started to become really lukewarm. Anyone who sees me, they would see me going to mass, but I wasn't really taking anything seriously. I was just kind of going through the motions. And I got really worldly. So I started pursuing other things. I kind of turned martial arts into like its own religion, and I've met plenty of guys that do that. I started doing that, and for some reason I was getting a lot of random anxiety, and I wasn't sure where it was coming from. I was eating right, I was exercising. I started getting into like Eastern stuff, which helped a little bit, but then at the end it just didn't really amount to anything. That is until one day, one of my teammates, at the time I was training mixed martial arts, he said, "Hey, why don't you compete? You should compete. That'll give you a goal, something to go towards." So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll compete. So I decided, I'm going to start with karate first, because I haven't done a karate competition in so long. So I was going to get back into it that way. So I faced my first opponent, and the first opponent I face, I kick him, and he starts like wheezing. And for the first time ever, I felt really guilty about it. And I don't know why. Why do I feel guilty about kicking somebody? This is a competition. We both agreed to do it. So I step back, let him recover, and then the match goes on, and then I barely win. It's like by 1 point. So then the second round, or with the second opponent, I think, okay, I can't be this nice. I got to actually, attack. I face the second opponent. He hits my shoulder, and it dislocates my shoulder. Yeah. And what's worse is I reached for the ground, and then I was like, oh, man, I felt like it was going to pop through my skin. But then luckily it somehow didn't, and it sunk back in place. And it's like pain I cannot describe. I had never experienced that much pain before. And the ref asked me, do you want to keep going? I was like, yeah, I'll keep going, because all my students were watching me at the time. And, I had to show them, like, hey, I can take it. But then I just lose terribly. Like, within 30 seconds, in karate, you need a 7-point lead to win. It was 0-7. I basically lost. All my students watched. They were also competing that day, too, and a lot of them lost, too, because they probably were just horrified at what they saw. And, seeing their instructor fall. But that put me into a really deep depression. And it put me so much that I prayed to God in a way that I hadn't prayed before. I said, Lord, if you exist, because at this point I was borderline agnostic at this point. I said, Lord, if you exist, please help me alleviate this anxiety. But don't just take it away, show me how to do it. And I'm totally open to what you want me to do. So the next thing that happened immediately when I said this prayer, and I can only describe it as like a motherly voice telling me, pray the rosary. And then as soon as I entertained that thought, saying I should pray the rosary, another kind of angry, very emotional person came out of me saying, don't do it, it's a bad idea, all sorts of blasphemies, things that I would never repeat. And it was so objectively bad that I realized, wait a minute, this is not me, this is something else. So I ignored that, and I said, I'm going to listen to the nice woman's voice and do that instead. So I started praying the rosary, but then I started to find out I'm not really consistent at it. So I asked God again, I said, Lord, if there's any way to make me consistent, show me how. Within a week later, my wife sends me a text. She's the one sitting back there with the camera. And she says, hey, we're getting a dog. And I'm like, okay. And then, like, this dog is from the shelter, so she has a lot of anxiety, and she won't, she might destroy stuff if we don't take her out for walks. So I was thinking, okay, I have to take her for a walk every day. Nothing else I can do but pray the rosary. So I started praying the rosary every day. It turned into a daily habit, turned into getting into mental prayer. I put on my brown scapular again because I lost it when I was 12, and just completely changed me as a person, right? And I think Our Lady did that. Now, going into Takayama, when I went back into training martial arts again, I started to see similarities between the spiritual life and martial arts. And what do I mean? Well, when you do something like pray the rosary every day, or go to mass, go to confession, you may not feel great every time, but the more you do that, when temptation comes, you're going to see it coming. You're going to see it coming from a mile away. You're going to be well prepared for it. Just like in martial arts, when I'm drilling, how to defend an armbar, which someone's trying to break my arm, I drill that move over and over so I can see the signs of, okay, this person's about to do this move. I know how to stop it. And I started seeing all these similarities in martial arts. So then I posted in Catholics at DFW Facebook group. I don't know if you guys are in that group. Yeah, all of you guys are. I've seen that. So I posted in there and said, hey, I want to start this group called Samurai for Christ. At the time, I didn't know who Takayama was. In fact, I didn't even think a samurai could be a saint because knowing what I know about samurai, they were very brutal people. It's not like how they show it in Hollywood. They did a lot of awful stuff. So I was like, there's no way. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to create a group where we meet up and kids are going to learn martial arts, but we're also going to do adoration together, go to mass, talk about virtue, do outreach, stuff like that. And then somebody commented and said, hey, do you know John? And I was like, who's that? And he's like, he has a painting of Blessed Takayama in the Vatican. And I was like, who's Blessed Takayama? This sounds awesome. So I look up on Amazon, I find the book by Father Loris, and it's on Kindle now, luckily, so y'all can read it. And I've read that book in 2 days, and it just touched me so deeply because here's a man who greatly misunderstood, again, like kind of what John was saying, like he's always portrayed as like an evil person, but he was such an example of Christ that he converted so many other souls, particularly Christian samurai. And, every martial artist thinks they're a samurai in some way or another because we practice and we resonate with that. And I meet so many guys who are martial artists who are just, without knowing it, they're practicing a lot of ascetical practices. Like they know how to fast, they know how to push through hard stuff, they know how to go through difficult things, but they're using martial arts as like their ultimate thing when they should be focused on Christ and use those talents for Christ. So I was thinking about that a lot, and one thing that I'm starting in the beginning of May. It's a boys Takayama youth group. If you guys are interested, I do have, it's on the back there. You'll see this flyer here. On the back, it'll have a QR code. We're having our first class on May 4th, Saturday, May 4th, where basically we're going to practice martial arts. I'm going to teach kids how to pray the rosary using mental prayer, because mental prayer, I think, from what parents tell me, it also helps them focus with a lot of things. So that's all I have for you guys today. So thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Taylor. So, our next guest is a doctor of history, and he actually resides here. This is his parish. Is that right to say a parish in the Byzantine? Okay, cool. So I don't know. So, anyways, let us bring up Dr. Joe Morrill.
If you don't mind, I'm not going to trust the cardboard construction with a laptop. Just to say. So my goal here will be to actually expand our understanding of the Christian samurai, not only in their ethos, but also in some of the names of famous Catholic samurai who are, unfortunately, no longer famous for us. So part of my goal here will be to show the unique meshing of the samurai ethos with the Catholic understanding of life, and how it was that these men, these powerful, important Japanese leaders, men who were directly connected with the Bakufu in Kyoto, found no qualms, no contradictions in living as a faithful Catholic and being a lord over certain lands, and even more importantly, in the case of at least one of them, a renowned warrior. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Otomo Yoshishige. He was the lord of Bungo in what is today Kyushu, and he was one of the first lords to meet with the Portuguese who had sailed to Kyushu from the eastern coast of Taiwan and China. And in his meetings with them, he was at first quite taken with them, not only because they had such a robust and courageous aura about them, and yet they were robed in the simplest of garments. And in the culture of the time, you do not come before the daimyo without rich presents, without without the best dress that you can find. So these men coming up to him with quite a lot of gusto, in wool robes, shocked him a bit. But their persistence and their education and the fact that they learned Japanese so quickly, completely foreign language to these men, led by, of course, the famous St. Francis Xavier. The fathers that came along with the Portuguese ships made such an impression on Otomo Yoshishige, that he eventually gave them land in Bungo, in his capital, and not only gave them the land, but gave them the funds and the opportunities to build schools, to build churches, and to educate his people. He openly encouraged them to bring Christianity to his people. And while doing so, he never gave up his title, he never gave up his goals as a daimyo over his people, but he, in fact, continued the trade with the Portuguese. He encouraged trade with the Portuguese, encouraged learning of Portuguese itself, and even sent a few of his own retainers to Rome to learn from Catholic clergy back in Europe. Now, there is a note here that I do want to bring up, because I noticed in my own research that the connection specifically of the Otomo and Bungo with the Portuguese sailors almost always went down to material possessions, specifically steel and guns. Guns were brought to Japan by the Portuguese and later the Spanish, but in digging further, I realized not only did Otomo do far more for the Catholics in his land than any sort of material benefit could bespeak, but there was also one very small, hardly read article that I was blessed to come by, probably Blessed Takayama sending it my way anyway, because it came through a random email that I did not request. There was an entire, what do you call it? A market. There was an entire market for firearms in Japan after the Portuguese brought matchlocks to them. The Tanegashima, named for the land that supposedly, at least, there's debate as to whether this was the particular area they first ran into firearms, but the Tanegashima became famous firearms in Japan, made by Japanese. So the scholars who had tried to argue that Otomo's connections with the Portuguese were for their guns and their steel, this one little article sort of shot that in the foot. The Japanese, certainly the Otomo especially, had taken in firearms. They thought it was an interesting invention, but they thought the design was deeply flawed. And if you set a Portuguese matchlock next to a Japanese Tanegashima, the Tanegashima is not only more technologically advanced, it's smaller and easier to use. So the market that the Tanegashima created sort of belies the whole idea that the Otomo were only interested in material possessions from the Portuguese. So with the Otomo expanding Catholicism in Kyushu, the Otomo would remain a famous Catholic daimyo, or a famous Catholic family in Japan for quite some time. Though the persecutions of the Bakufu would take their effect under Tokugawa Ieyasu. The second gentleman I want to introduce you to is one who is arguably much more famous in Japan still, Konishi Yukinaga. Konishi Yukinaga got his start, interestingly, as the son of a druggist. I kept the term from the old 1920s scholar that I read from because it sounds a lot funnier than a pharmacist. However, Yoshige is the other one. Yukinaga kept his humble origins always before him. Not only was he raised as a Catholic, and that was something that was rather unique in his becoming a daimyo during this time, first under Oda Nobunaga and then very soon under Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He, for his symbol, the symbol that hung off of the flag that was symbolic on the back of the samurai armor, he kept a drug bag on it. Which admittedly sounds weird in English, but it was a symbol of being a pharmacist, and so it was a humbler origin than many of his contemporaries. But Konishi Yukinaga was so good at keeping the books, as simple as that sounds, that Toyotomi Hideyoshi took him into the Bakufu, and he became a very important element of the Bakufu economy throughout the reign of Hideyoshi, and eventually became a confidant of Hideyoshi himself, reportedly, though no real evidence to support it, reportedly serving him tea. And for a man as paranoid, perhaps rightly so, as Toyotomi Hideyoshi, to be able to serve him tea was an incredible honor and an incredible sign of trust in Konishi Yukinaga. Beyond that, not only was he trusted by Toyotomi, but he also led the Imjin War. He was instrumental in the Japanese invasion of Korea during or just after the unification under Hideyoshi. So, in his attempts to conquer Korea, he, interestingly, against his notoriously anti-Christian Buddhist counterpart who was taking the other side of Korea. He, within a couple of months, had conquered Korea from Seoul to Pyongyang. And only by one unfortunate diplomatic faux pas that ended up insulting both the Ming Emperor and Toyotomi Hideyoshi at the same time, he had managed to conquer Korea. He was not able to hold it because he was recalled eventually by Hideyoshi for the faux pas. But eventually, Konishi would hold to his loyalty to the Toyotomi all the way to the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, where the forces of Toyotomi Hideyori, the successor to Hideyoshi, and the forces of Tokugawa Ieyasu fought out their great battle for who would control a unified Japan. The battle ended poorly, of course, for Hideyori and his forces, and one of the daimyo that was captured was Konishi Yukinaga. And when he was brought before Tokugawa, he was told, "You have been defeated, and to save your honor, you will commit seppuku." And while there is a famous story written by a later anti-Christian author under the Tokugawa Bakufu where he rolls back and forth in his mind whether he would or would not, what is known from contemporary sources is that Konishi Yukinaga stared him down and said, "Well, I can't. So you will have to kill me." Now, while an execution is certainly not the desired end of all of that, what was unusual for that time is that such executions were considered dishonorable. And so instead of committing suicide and giving up on such a fundamental idea of his faith, he would rather accept such societal blame, such societal censure as a public execution before the shogun, than to give up any portion of the faith that he had adhered to so ardently that that was one of the first things anyone ever mentioned about him when they introduced him. He and his brother and his father were known not only as great warriors and very good administrators, but they were ardent Catholics. And that is all I have for you.
He had his samurai sword on. And I was going to ask Father if I can bring swords, but I had already asked him so many things. So he would, there it is. Hold it up, Joe. Yeah. So I don't know if that warrants a clap, but go ahead. Our next speaker is a gentleman that I met in a weird way. His name is Chris Covington. He is a police officer, investigator, detective from Baltimore, Maryland. He will tell you the story on how we met. It's just an incredible thing. But anyways, Chris Covington. By the way, I actually label him as a real live Indiana Jones, and he'll tell you why.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. John, thank you for organizing this whole event. Father Elias, thank you for letting us use your parish. This is amazing, and thanks to everyone for coming out. As John said, I am a law enforcement officer, and I got to tell you, when Dr. Joe said that he had a drug bag on his flag, I couldn't help but laugh. So, first and foremost, I'm a father, and I'm a husband, and a family man, and of course a devout Catholic. In 1986, I started learning martial arts. I started doing modern Japanese martial arts. In 1993, I started collecting and studying antique Japanese swords, the samurai swords. In 99, I switched over from modern Japanese martial arts to the ancient Japanese martial arts. These are the martial arts that the samurai themselves actually practiced. I do have a bachelor's degree in Asian studies with a focus on Japanese history. So that's kind of a little bit of background about me. Last week, I read an interesting statistic. In Japan, there are fewer than 500,000 Catholics. That ends up being a third of a percentage point of the population. A third of a percent of the people there are actually Catholics. And Christians as a whole, Protestants and other denominations, don't fare much better. So it's kind of a strange place to think of finding your Catholic faith. But that's exactly what happened to me. For full disclosure, I was baptized Catholic, but I wasn't raised Catholic. My father, he was a Protestant, and I don't think he's practiced his faith since he was about 15 or 16 years old. Can you hear me? My father, he hasn't practiced his faith since he was probably about 15 or 16 years old. My mother is an Italian Catholic, so if some of you know Italian Catholics, there's probably a rosary in every room, or a holy medal, or a prayer card. And if you lose your car keys, who do you pray to? St. Anthony. Everything else, Padre Pio, right? And if there's something that Padre Pio can't handle, and there are very few things Padre Pio can't handle, Mother Mary, right? So, but we never went to Mass. I never went to Mass as a child. I never knew anything about it. So I was basically agnostic, borderline atheist for most of my childhood and early teenage years. And then in 2001, my father had his first heart attack. It was right after the Ravens won the Super Bowl. He had his first heart attack, and we called 911, and I knew I needed to do something. I wanted to pray, but I didn't know how to pray, and I didn't know who to pray to. I mean, I'm basically agnostic, right? Who do I pray to? So I prayed to the greater power. If you exist, if you're there, please save my father. Please help me out. Now, Dad has had 8 more heart attacks, and he had triple bypass surgery last year, but he's still alive. So the greater power listened to me, so I'm grateful for that. But I said, if you're there, I'm going to find some faith. So you can imagine what I decided. I'm going to become a Buddhist. So I'm looking at all the different Japanese schools of Buddhism. I'm going to university for an Asian studies degree, so I'm going to become a Buddhist. I'm looking at Zen, I'm looking at Tendai, all these different sects of Buddhism. And later that year, I had a trip to Japan scheduled. This is in the late summer 2001. Some of you might know where this is going to go. But I'm practicing martial arts, I'm having a great time, and I'm checking out all these Buddhist temples. It's amazing. It was an awesome time. And then we're flying back home. We're flying back home on September 11th, 2001. So some of the younger folks might not remember that, but some of the older folks probably know what happened. Our plane got diverted to Canada. So I got to spend 3 days in Canada, but it was a stressful time. This wasn't a fun vacation. My mother, now remember, she has rosaries hanging on every surface of our house, right? She packed a rosary in my bag. I didn't know why, but she packed a rosary in there. Now, I don't know how to pray a rosary, so I picked the rosary up, and I'm sitting there shaking it. Come on, Jesus, get me home. Come on, Jesus, get me home. A friend of mine who was Catholic at the time, he's like, Chris, you're a heathen. And I said, do you want to teach me how to pray it right? He's like, well, no. I'm like, okay, come on, Jesus, get us home, right? And we made it home. So after that time in Canada, I make it home, I attend Mass, I fall in love with it. I love the Catholic faith. It's a beautiful faith. So I didn't get into RCIA class soon enough to get into the 2002 cohort, but I was given First Communion, and I was confirmed in 2003. And that's how I developed my Catholic faith in Canada. Wait. I said Japan, right? So the story didn't end there. But at the time it did in my mind. I became Catholic while I was in Canada, right? But God has a way of revealing things, and sometimes it's a retroactive awareness or retroactive recognition of grace, and that's what happened to me. Because while I was in Japan during that trip, I went down to Kamakura. We took a day trip to Kamakura. It's a beautiful city. It's an ancient capital, and there's this giant Buddha statue called the Daibutsu. It's about the size of a 3-story house. It's huge. I think you pay $1 and you can go inside and you can look around inside of it. It's a beautiful statue. We got lost. My Japanese is horrible. And asking for directions, this is before you had cell phones and you can just plug in, where you want to go, and Google Maps will tell you how to walk there. So I'm asking directions. How do you get there? And people are like, go down 3 or 4 blocks, make a left. We're lost. We're wandering around Kamakura like crazy people. And I find this weird building. It's shaped sort of like a tent, and it has this gold mosaic of Mother Mary on it. Me and my friends were like, let's check that out. Let's see what it is. And turns out it was the Yukinoshita Catholic Parish. So while I am quite literally looking for Buddha in my life, and also a giant statue, I found Christ's church. And at that moment I was like, whoa, my faith was planted in Tokyo or Kamakura. My faith was planted in Japan. What a strange place, considering there aren't very many Catholics there. So moving forward, about 2016, I start getting all these messages. Now, of course, I'm interested in Japanese stuff. I'm interested in samurai, martial arts, swords, all that cool stuff. And somebody says, hey, the church is going to beatify a samurai warlord. I'm like, whoa, that's really cool. So I start looking up news articles, and I start looking up, the different websites, and I keep seeing this one picture over and over and over again. And you guys might be familiar with it. It's the one over there. It's John's painting. I didn't know John at that point, but I reached out to him, and we became Facebook friends because of that painting. But that painting, before I even knew John, I printed it out, and I put it up on my wall. I put it in some nice paper in a frame, and it's still hanging on my wall today. Every morning I wake up, I look at John's painting of Blessed Takayama. So I began studying Blessed Takayama. I started buying books. I started reading. Some of these books are pretty hard to find. Some of them are pretty old. So I'm spending all this money, and I'm reading about him. So I wanted to give you guys a few thoughts about Takayama, okay? So 3 things. When you think of Blessed Takayama, first thing you want to do is think about his Catholic faith. He was an incredibly devout Catholic. When he was exiled to Manila, and when he arrived in the Philippines, everyone knew that he was a saint walking among them while he was alive. He was buried in a crypt with all of the bishops and archbishops of Manila. No other laity was buried there, but they buried Blessed Takayama there because they knew that he was going to be a saint one day. And so if you think of him, think of that, right? Think of him as a Catholic gentleman. The other thing, he was a tea master. What does that mean? And I'm sure Ms. Yoko will probably explain a lot of this, but tea is a ceremony in Japan, and it is a social lubricant. It is a ritual, and it's greatly influenced by the Catholic Mass. And Blessed Takayama was a master of this particular discipline. So he actually got the Jesuits to put either a tea house or a special room in every Catholic parish in Japan to welcome Japanese guests. So very influential with this. The last thing to think about, because he was a warlord, he was a samurai lord, he was a daimyo, and his specialty was castle warfare. He would either siege castles or he would defend castles. That was what he was known for. And when he was building castles, he had an army of carpenters and he had an army of stonemasons. But what he also had them do was build churches. So he had churches built all through the region around Osaka and Kyoto. In fact, he even built the first seminary in Japan in Azuchi. So he was a church builder, right? Not just a warlord, he wasn't looking to destroy things. He was looking to build things. So whenever you think of him, think of those 3 things. Keep those in your mind. Now, how is he practical today, right? Because it's a little out of touch, a 16th century samurai lord. It's hard for us to grasp that. So I can think of 2 examples. The first one was when he was exiled the second time. He got exiled 3 times from Japan, or from his duty. One of the things that he did when his first boss was killed, his first boss was assassinated. His boss, Oda Nobunaga, decided he wanted to be worshipped as a deity once he died. So all of his generals, all of his samurai lords, when he died, they at the funeral started making offerings to him like a god. And one of the things Blessed Takayama refused to do was make this offering. He said, I'll show up for the funeral. I'm going to show the proper respect, but I'm not going to worship him. I'm not going to deify the man because I knew him. He's not a god. Christ is God. Jesus, God. These are 2 separate things. And that's practical in today's world because between ecumenism and syncretism, there's a fine line between these 2 things, right? We see some clergy even will start meshing foreign religions into the Mass. And we have to be mindful of these things. We have to keep them separate. We can go to a Jewish wedding or a Muslim funeral, but we have to keep our Catholic faith through all of these interactions. And we have to be proud of our Catholic faith. The other point I'd like to make is that in each one of his exiles, he had a wife. Her name was Justa. His baptismal name was Justo. Her name was Justa. It was just a coincidence. But they had the same baptism name. But she was a devout wife. Every time he was exiled, he lost his titles, he lost his home, he lost his source of income. He lived as a peasant each time he was exiled. Now, he got reinstated a couple times, but she stayed with him the entire time. Now, why is that? Because he was the man that he needed to be. He was the husband. He was the father. And it shows the importance of Catholic marriage. I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but I keep hearing 51, 52% of marriages fail today, right? Marriage is in crisis. So we can use them as an example to live by with our own Catholic faith and our own sacramental marriages. Now, just reading a bunch of books wouldn't be a good reason for me to come here, fly all the way from Baltimore to show up, right? I mean, a lot of people can read the books. Anyone here could read the books. They can buy them on Amazon, or you might have to go to antique stores to find them, but you can find them. But I also wrote a book. So I've written a book about Blessed Takayama. But notice I don't have any books out to sell, right? Because I haven't published yet. And I'm thinking, I haven't brought anything new. There's nothing new I've brought to the body of work. Most of the information we have is from the Jesuit fathers from the 16th century. So I'd just be rehashing the same story over and over again. But there's one piece of information that we're missing. Almost all the loose ends are tied up. But there's one important piece that's missing. What happened to Blessed Takayama's swords, right? The samurai swords. Everybody remembers samurai because of their swords, right? Well, turns out, before he died in the Philippines, he gave his swords to the Franciscans, and they kept it in their convent for a couple centuries, until 1898, during the Spanish-American War. The Franciscans, they packed up all their stuff, and they went back to Madrid, Spain. So they took everything. And if the swords are still around, they're probably in Madrid, Spain. Through John, Dr. De Pedro, who's another scholar on Blessed Takayama, I was introduced to Cardinal Maeda. And the Cardinal gave me a letter of endorsement to introduce myself to the Franciscans. So my next mission, and I think what would actually justify publishing, is I'm going to look for Blessed Takayama's sword. So I just scheduled my first trip to Madrid at the end of the month, or end of next month. So if I could get some prayers, particularly from Blessed Takayama, Saint Helena, the emperor's mother who found the true cross, and Saint Anthony, Padre Pio, and Mother Mary, I would greatly appreciate it. And by the way, there's some amazing merchandise at the back, so if you get a chance, check it out, because John's been busy at work making some awesome stuff. Thank you, everyone. We'll do Q&A afterwards.
Me to cut you off, because this guy, actually, Cardinal Maeda actually considers him, and Dr. De Pedro, who started the canonization process for Justo Takayama, they actually consider this guy an authority on Justo Takayama and some of his history. So I don't know. So, but I'm very, very, very happy that this guy is amongst our panel of guests. Here you go. Our next guest comes all the way from Tokyo, Japan. She is a tea ceremony artist. She she does play the shamisen. She was an actress. She also did a lot of work with arts and culture in Japan. Let us welcome Yoko Kamon.
Good evening, everyone. Is it okay? ありがとう。 And I'm honored to have been chosen to give a speech here about Catholicism in Japan. I'm Yoko from Tokyo, Japan. I was baptized at the Catholic Church in Tokyo on the day of the Easter Vigil last year. Thank you. Today I would like to talk about why I became Catholic and what I personally feel about Japanese society and what I think we can do to share God's love with Japanese people. And I've always liked studying English and often hang out with my English-speaking friends in Japan. One of them was Catholic, and about 5 years ago took me to a church in Tokyo that held Mass in all English. At first, I had a casual feeling that the English Mass was fun because it was a good way to learn the language, and it was exciting to see people from many countries. To be honest, at first, I thought that the Bible was like a science fiction drama. The reason was to study English at first, but I started participating in Bible study regularly. But every time I read the Bible, I felt like I was being confronted with the weak, cowardly, and ugly part of myself. Or I was encouraged by the characters who live hard despite having similar worries to me. There were times when I received strong affirmation of my efforts. I sensed peace when I was quietly facing the Bible and when I attended Mass. And others are standing in line, during Mass, and eating biscuit-like items. When my friends told me that I couldn't receive it because I wasn't Catholic, I wondered why. After receiving something like a biscuit, the people had the look of quiet peace on their faces. I won't go into details here, but my life had not been easy. Ever since I was little, I had wanted to die many times. However, even in my life where I wanted to die, there were times when I would shed tears of joy when I saw the gentle sunlight flittering, the trees swaying in the pleasant breeze, or the beautiful flowers. The peace I felt while reading the Bible or at Mass was similar to those. And I thought I wanted to pursue that peace even more. After that, I just live each day to the direction I think I'm being led. Suicide is the number one cause of death for young people aged 15 to 39 in Japan. Japan is the only developed country where suicide is the leading cause of death among young people. It can be caused by a variety of reasons, such as family problems, workplace harassment, poverty, cyberbullying, and so on. 1 in 3 marriage couples divorce. Many high school girls have older sugar daddies. They may be looking for money for their own desires, but I think they are also looking for fatherhood. Many husbands don't go home and hang out at hostess bars and have affairs. They probably want to be admired by someone because their wives don't respect them. Wives cheat too. They feel lonely because their husbands don't tell them they love their wives. Japanese people are taught that it's good to be quiet. and behave well. At school and at work, it's said that it's good not cause problems and to be just cooperative. Stand out from the crowds and you just invite trouble for yourself. Mental isolation comes easily in Japan. There are many depressions and many people are materialistic. And many people are being socially withdrawn, not seeing anybody. They are isolated from the world. As the population concentrates in big cities, rural areas are becoming depopulated. The number of children is decreasing, and the number of elderly people is increasing. Many wonderful traditional cultures are in danger of extinction. These are crises caused by a lack of faith. Most Japanese think of religious as something suspicious and dangerous. About 30 years ago, a terrorist attack occurred in Tokyo in which a religious group called Om Shindikyo sprayed poison gas on the subway. In Japan, when you talk about religion, most people end up thinking you are either someone who recruits them to a group for dangerous activities or money, or that you are just mentally broken. Japanese society doesn't allow me to share my faith. Japan's population is about 125 million. The number of Catholics is about 441,000, making up only 0.31% of the total population. I used to live in Tokyo until about a year ago. Tokyo is Japan's largest city and has a large population. At that time, I went to the church for foreigners that I mentioned earlier. And there were many foreigners who had been born and raised in Catholic families and helped me learn about the faith. And some of the participants were Japanese or my age, so I had no trouble maintaining my faith. However, due to work, I moved to a southern prefecture named Chiba. And when I went to a nearby church, I found that there were not many people attending. Most of them were very elderly Japanese or Filipino and Vietnamese. So I can't find any close friends now. The priest is also very elderly and seems to have difficulty speaking clearly and loudly. So I barely hear what he's saying in his homily, even though he speaks Japanese. He and the old man, who seems to be his assistant, lead the mass hesitantly while looking at their notes. I hope that more Japanese young people will become Catholic and they will be able to hold Mass smoothly even in rural areas. However, I feel that this would be difficult for Japanese people alone. I started thinking about how Japanese culture could help bring God to Japan. St. Augustine once said that beauty is the first way to God. I understand these words well, since I mentioned earlier, I have personally experienced being healed by the beauty of nature, God's creation, during extremely difficult times. Japan has a lot of beautiful culture to be proud of. Among them are kimono, Japanese art, history, anime, sword making, and pottery. But many traditional cultures are dying. One of them is the tea ceremony. Tea was originally introduced to Japan from China. At first, tea was a precious commodity in Japan and was a drink of some noble people. In the mid-Kamakura period, the method of grinding tea leaves into matcha and mixing it with a tea whisk became popular. During Muromachi period, a tea master who has practiced Zen created a simple tea room of 4.5 tatami mats and emphasized the spirituality of those who practiced tea, seeking peace of mind by making tea there. The famous Rikyu, who lived in Sengoku era, have perfected the form of the tea ceremony that we know nowadays. There are many theories about Rikyu, and there is no complete evidence for all of them, but one of them is probably intriguing to all of you. That is, Rikyu might have been a Catholic, and he put Catholic essence into the tea ceremony. Rikyu made the entrance to the room very small. Everyone was required to bow and stoop to enter the tea room. In the tea room, everyone should be humble and equal. Samurai cannot enter the tea room with the sword because the entrance is narrow. It reminds me of the passage from Matthew 7:13, enter by the narrow gate. Rikyu created a special cup for drinking only matcha called Raku Chawan that reflected the spirit of wabi-sabi. Wabi referred to the purity and tranquility found in simplicity. Sabi represents the sense of depth and quiet, calm beauty that comes with the passage of time. I feel that the spirit of wabi-sabi is really similar to that of Catholicism. We can also see many similarities between Mass and ceremony. In the tea ceremony, we use the rectangular white cloth to purify the cup. This movement reminds me of purifying the chalice with a white cloth at Mass. The front of the bowl is placed facing the guest, and the front of the chalice is also placed facing the priest. The matcha powder is stored in a container that doesn't make the powder damp. So before the tea ceremony, we transfer the powder to the beautiful small tea container that will be used during the ceremony. When transferring the powder, we draw a cross on the powder. When I asked my teacher, who is not Catholic, she told me that it was simply for arranging the powder into a nice shape. Today's organizer, John, came to Japan for his artwork in last December. At that time, we were able to see Cardinal of West Japan and went to the cathedral. We saw that a painting related to the tea ceremony was displayed there. Catholic Church in Japan reveres tea ceremony. There were many Catholics among Rikyu's disciples and those around him, and Fusto Takayama was one of them. Rikyu attended Mass regularly, so he must have been heavily influenced by Mass, even if he was not officially Catholic. Those who promote the theory that Rikyu was not Catholic do so on the theory that Rikyu committed suicide through seppuku. Seppuku is a ritual suicide of the samurai class. A person sentenced to seppuku must stab himself in the stomach with a dagger, slit his stomach, and turn the blade upward to ensure a fatal wound. Rikyu was ordered to commit seppuku by the shogun Toyotomi Hideyoshi and died. However, there is actually a theory that he refused seppuku and was beheaded. We don't know the truth. And here is an interesting painting. Yeah, this one. This is a painting called Nanban Byobu, drawn by Kano Naizen. There is an old man in here, this guy, and this man is wearing a hood and sandal called seta. Seta is said to be footwear invented by Rikyu, and this guy also wear a hood like the one shown in the. Oh, okay. Then this book's author, believed that this man is Rikyu. Rikyu died in 1591, and it is estimated that this painting was made within 10 years after Rikyu's death. And the author of the book said that it may have been created to preserve the fact that Rikyu was Catholic. The reason for Rikyu's death is also shrouded in mystery, but some say that Shogun Hideyoshi realized that Rikyu had incorporated Catholicism into the tea ceremony, and the people, including Hideyoshi, were taught Catholicism unwittingly. Then he got outraged and ordered Rikyu to commit seppuku, because it was around the time when Shogun Hideyoshi issued the order expelling Jesuit missionaries from Japan. The morning Rikyu died was a stormy day with heavy rain and even large hail, and Rikyu's head was exposed on the bridge. If Rikyu was Catholic, maybe he should be a saint. And there are so many Japanese saints waiting to be discovered, such as Fusto Takayama. Isn't it exciting to be discover and promote them with enjoying Japanese beautiful culture? Japanese people, especially the young, have a tendency of being interested in things that are popular in other countries. It seems that the tea ceremony, which has Catholic essence, is already popular in foreign countries, but if it becomes more and more popular, I think Japanese people will become interested again, and it will bring them closer to God. That is the beauty of evangelization through art and culture. I would like to conclude this speech with this message to each one of you. Japanese people need your help. Thank you for coming and listening to my speech. God bless you.
So, as you can see, there is an influence in the Japanese tea ceremony that is Catholic. It's interesting that in Osaka, Japan, in the cathedral, there's actual paintings of Rikyu inside, and it's almost like they really want to start the process for him. The thing is just that they don't have the proof that he was Catholic. But if you look at it, Rikyu taught, one of his main students was Fusto Takayama. I kind of see them and several other tea masters that were Catholic as almost like what's his name? C.K. Lewis? C.J. Lewis? What is it? Yeah, there you go. And then the other guys that he hung out with, that they wrote all those crazy books. Yeah, so I know that they sat down and they talked about this. In fact, one of Rikyu's other students was Tadaoki Hosokawa. Tadaoki Hosokawa was another samurai lord. And the funny thing is that that lord also hung out with Justo Takayama. Tadaoki, his wife was Hosokawa Gracia. Hosokawa Gracia, show if you can find, there she is, right there. Hosokawa Gracia. She is actually featured as one of the main characters in the Shogun show that is right now on Hulu and whatnot. But again, they twist her character like crazy. Okay? And she actually has a statue in front of Osaka Cathedral as if like she is going to be a saint. It's just incredible how the Japanese people have so many saints in their midst that they're just waiting to be discovered. And if the Japanese people see that there are saints, we actually have a shot of converting through the evangelization through their own people. That's what they're waiting for. I don't know how many people have visited Japan. There you go. Now you tell me, yes, they've got Studio Ghibli. Yes, they got ramen noodle soup. Yes, they got the great rice. They got the sushi. But when you are there is a spiritual desert. There really is. And so, like, we kind of feel like this is our opportunity with Justo Takayama, Rikyu, the creator of the Japanese tea ceremony, and how we can evangelize through that art. Please help us. Now, we got one more speaker. Father, how are we doing on time? Are we okay? Okay, great. I mean, are you interested? You like this? Yeah, great. If Father likes it, you guys should like it. Now, we've got one more speaker. And his name is Sean Scavolin. We just barely started saying his last name proper, and I've known this guy through high school. Crazy story, again, with me and him. His mom was a prayer leader at St. Francis in Grapevine. We went to South Lake Carroll High, and yes, we were buddies, but he thought I was weird. He didn't want to hang out with me. He'd rather hang out with my brother. He'd rather hang out with my brother, the one that was painting out there, rather than me, because I was so uncool and overweight. So, let's introduce Sean Scavolin. But the funny thing is about Scott, he is a filmmaker. We are actually planning on doing some really good work with this guy because he does have some really good work behind him. That he's been to several film festivals, the Toronto. What else, Sean? What other ones? Yeah, well, the big ones. I'm telling you right now, he's a very quiet guy. Okay, he got all the girls in high school. So he really wasn't that quiet. But anyways, Sean Scavolin, my buddy from high school, and it's just very interesting how we ended up hooking up again with this particular project. Sean Scavolin, or Scavolin.
John, I don't know about that introduction. I loved John in high school. What is he saying? We were in the same art class, and I really I thought he was a brother. We went to St. Francis together, and we didn't hang out tons, and we didn't. It was a long time. It's been a long time. So I think we just reconnected about a year ago, and I had a film screening in Grapevine, and I was like, oh, I think John would like this film. It was this doc I did about these three ladies who were former abortion industry workers, and they told a really powerful story. But anyway, I met up with John, and John said some really nice things about me in the Q&A afterwards, and we hung out a little bit afterwards, and he starts telling me what he's been up to, and he tells me about the samurai saint, right? I'm like, what? Isn't that a contradiction? It sounds fascinating. I want to know more about this guy, and so I was very intrigued, and I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, wouldn't that be a great film project? I'm like, yeah, that would be a great film project. But like it would have to be done correctly, right? This guy is from what I can tell, has a really important role, a really important story to tell, especially for his country. And that would require doing it at a level and a lot of participation with the Japanese. We would need Japanese scholars. We would need translators. We would need connections to production companies, Japanese production companies. We would need actors. All of these things. And I was like, so it's like, I love it. I love the project. It sounds fascinating, but probably not realistic, right? But over the course of the year, the thing about John is that he has an amazing faith, and he is a providentialist, and he lets God work through him. And this you guys are an example. You're all participating in that tonight. John he introduces me to Chris. Oh, I've got a Justo Takayama historian and scholar. Okay, well that's good. We need that. And then introduces me to Yoko, tea master or tea artist, and tea ceremony artist, former actress too. And then I'm at Sundance Film Festival showing one of my films, and I'm talking to this Italian professor of film in Milan. He's like, oh, really? Let me connect you with a contact that I have who owns a production company in Japan, and let me also connect you with the screenwriter, a former student of mine who speaks Japanese and knows the culture really well. Okay, I guess we'll keep talking about this, and so at this point, after agreeing to be here tonight and to do something I really am afraid of, is that it's talking in front of people. I hate it. But I'm here because I think there is, that there is. This project is coming together, and I think I have to pay attention to it, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I'm really excited about it. Listening to these guests tonight talk about how important Blessed Takayama is, how the history of Japan. I think we understand. We've got a good idea of why this guy's story, amongst others, needs to be resurrected, needs to be brought to the forefront, especially understanding too that Japan looks to the West, right? They're influenced from the West, and I think that gives me a certain license to be able to tell the story, right? Because normally it's like, I'm not Japanese. I wouldn't be able to tell this story correctly. But anyway, that's a lot longer than I had planned to talk about on the introduction. I wanted to share a few thoughts on some scenes in Blessed Justo's life that I've been thinking about a lot. Let's see. So, as you know, born into the samurai bloodline, trained to be a warrior and a governor, right? A daimyo, the power players. the warriors. I can imagine the scene that I imagine that I've been thinking about quite a bit is the 20-year-old Blessed Justo, injured with serious wounds, laying in his bed, forced to consider these two ways of life. He had just, this dichotomy in his life. He had just won a battle with his father. It was a ambush attack to get rid of the Christian general in this overlord's army, his dad, right? And it was a setup. He was invited to come, and so he brings his son, and he hears that there's going to be an ambush, and so he brings some of his samurai warriors, right? And it turns into this like really epic battle, and they win. And then there's also this story. There's an account that Justo, the son, had to have a duel with the son of the overlord, right? A one-on-one to the death duel, and it sounds really like cinematic, or amazing, emotional fight to the death, and something that you see in the movies. I'm glad I entertained you on that. But we can laugh, but that was like, it couldn't be more intense, right? And he wins. He kills the guy. He's seriously injured, and he's healing. His dad introduces him to this new way, this sort of Christianity, the way of Christ. He's baptized into it. He's young. Still, he was around 12, and now he's 20. Now is the time to really sort of take on his faith. And I can imagine him really grappling with these two ways, the way of the sword and the way of the cross. This real tension, and that would set the course of his life, the next 40 years of his life. We hear the phrase "the way of the sword" in the Gospel of Matthew, right? When Jesus tells Peter, before his passion, and Judas comes and brings the soldiers to arrest Jesus, right? And what does Peter do? He pulls out his sword and swipes one of the soldiers' ears off, and Jesus says, "Those who live by the sword die by the sword," right? It's always been a curious scene, right? Like surely Jesus is not warning him of a brutal death, right? Like, you don't want to do this because you're going to die a brutal death. That couldn't be it, because what he proceeds to do is to demonstrate the way of the cross, the way of an extreme self-giving sacrifice that redeems. And so surely he wasn't telling him to not do that because to be spared of a brutal death. No, I think it was more demonstrating the way of the sword is the symbol. The symbol of the sword is the symbol of worldly power by domination, power through force. Let's see. So, Justo, considering the way of the sword or the way of the cross, right? I'm sure he was filled with pain, hurt, anger, being persecuted for his faith, his dad being attacked, and I just only imagine being human that he and being a very accomplished warlord that he would say, he would have the urge to defend his faith, defend his clan, defend with power, right? With the sword. He's a military mastermind. But he doesn't end up choosing that, right? And that dialogue that he has with himself sets the tone for the rest of his life. In the next 40 years, he is a continual offering of himself instead of exercise of power through domination. And so the competing temporal powers in Japan wanted his warrior skills because he had proven himself, and if they couldn't have them for their own, then he was only a nuisance, right? And that's what happened. The next 40 years was a renouncing of his nobility, right? His status and his power within the empire or the kingdoms, but he consistently renounced the worldly power for a true nobility in the power of Christ, right? His renouncing was actually a accepting and a drawing forward into the invitation to become a son of the true God, the true kingdom. So he does this at least 3 times, 3 like really notable times. He chose the way of sacrifice, which is, baffling for his people, right? He's a very confusing figure. Japan, they don't know what to do with him. In fact, one time they're so impressed by that, right? So he gets rehired several times because they're like, whatever. They don't get it. They think these leaders are used to like acclaiming themselves as gods, and so like it's a constant like push and pull. He's thought of as this pinnacle of virtues, of samurai virtues and character, but at the same time he doesn't bow down to the overlords and the people that are finding respect for him, and then that gets him puts him in a place where he's not useful to them. He and I think he and his dad aligned the samurai code, right? Justice, loyalty, honor, respect, courage, mercy, all of these things that were embedded into the samurai culture, but weren't actually sort of being practiced, right? Like, so there's this weird thing. So I think this is why that Christianity seemed so attractive to them. They noticed that these virtues pointed towards and were oriented towards this heavenly logic, right? And as opposed to this worldly logic. And so what he does is he puts them in the right place. God's grace elevates them and purifies them. In every chapter of Justo's life, he's sowing seeds of redemption for Japan and the world. They have borne much fruit, but there's so much more to blossom. Okay. The next scene that is really striking for me is when he has, this is 40 years of offering offering up his nobility, offering up his status to preserve and save his people, to build churches, to live with integrity, live according to his values, the truth that he now knows is real. So this scene at the end of his life, he's finally exiled, like out of Japan completely, and he gets on the ship to go to the Philippines, to Manila, and there is a storm that takes them off course. They're lost at sea. This is after months of this sort of walking to the coast with his people, tired, sick, and I can just see, like, and they're lost. This is normally I don't know how many days the trip would be, but it was like tripled or quadrupled because they were lost, and they were just like stuck in this storm, and he's hanging on to the wood of the ship. He's being inundated, washed with this storm, and the waves coming over the bow. It's just this scene compressed with incredibly rich symbolism that reflects his path. A symbolism of baptism and the crucifixion, all in one. He's living out this sort of sacramental, like compressed event that caps off the rest of his life. And I think it's extremely moving to me, and it's beautiful because to me it's like it's a symbol of what we're all doing, and especially the Catholics in Japan, right? We're hanging on to the cross of our Lord in the stormy waters, floating around in the swirling midst of worldly powers and sort of secular confusion. This was his final life-giving act. He safely delivers. He brings a group, his family. He brings these Christians, his friends, the people's he cares for to safety, leaving behind over 30, 40 years of seeds that he had sown in the land, a long martyrdom. He's considered a martyr, although that he wasn't physically killed, a living martyr. But along with those martyrs, you could see that in his life, these sacrificial acts that he offers are like seeds being sown in the land throughout Japan, because he was all over. So what I think this film project is doing, and what we're all doing here, is trying to resurrect Blessed Justo into the consciousness of the world, and enthrone him in his rightful place within Japanese culture as the highest model of samurai nobility and redeemer of Japanese culture. So, thank you for listening to me ramble. Thank you for being here tonight. I really am excited. I'm kind of blown away at how you guys all got here, right? And I really would love to stay in touch with all of you and to keep you posted on the progress of this film, the development of this film. And all of our projects, right? I think it's a multi-pronged event, and we need you. We need you, your interest, your support, your prayers. We need, like, immediately, like with this film project, we need to start a research phase, and we need to start writing, and that takes it takes support, it takes travel, it takes time and commitment on the part of the people who are doing the work. So thank you. I look forward to questions and and keeping in touch. God bless you guys.
You can tell he's a film guy, right? Man, he was just giving. I was like, in my head, I was saying, man, don't give the whole story away. Jeez. But anyways, as you can tell, guys, we all share a common interest. And we're really short on time because I told Father we're going to get out of here. But we do need your support. And if you can spare it, we've got lovely works for you in the back. We've got actual matcha cups from Japan that Yoko brought with her. They almost confiscated it from what is it called? They told her to throw something. What did they tell you to throw away? Oh, forget it. So probably gum. But anyways, we do have lovely products, guys, that are back there. We've got these posters, the first edition posters, that if you buy it at its price, I will sign it. Okay? Again, that particular painting is in the Vatican. So guys, please, if you can support us with the projects that we've got going on, it does take support. Look, I want you to see our speaker, okay, and our podium. Oh, we need help, all right? We put this up really quick for the tall guys like Mr. Stevens and the short people like me. So if we can have your help, guys, you know what? They are listed priced, but we will work with you only because we really would like to get some of these guys, the film crew, to interview a lot more Japanese treasures. We've got a lot of Japanese treasures. One lady her name is Yoshiko Fujino. She actually is, does anybody know what NHK is? No? Yes? NHK is the biggest television network in Japan. And she was an anchor woman, beautiful woman. She is a classy woman. I mean, she prays the rosary on Facebook every day. She was converted just because she was an anchor woman, and they sent her on location to Pope John Paul II's funeral, and she was converted there. She now is facing the obstacles that Yoko and many Japanese Catholics are facing, which is how to evangelize. They're so lost. They don't know how, and they need our support. There's another lady that I ran into, and her name is Jun Ando. And Jun Ando is actually nobility, and her mother was actually, get this, was the tea master that was the nanny to Emperor Hirohito. She is off the branch of the Akechi family. She is the only one now that does the tea ceremony for the shogun, which there's no more shoguns, for the shogun and for the emperor. And she's Catholic. It's a Catholic family that has been hidden within the emperor's family in Japan. And the Japanese really don't know about this stuff. It's almost like they're afraid to show that, a lot of their traditions and whatnot is really rooted in Catholicism. And that's an incredible, potent power there. It really is. If they really knew what the tea ceremony really is and all the Catholicism influence inside the tea ceremony alone, guys, who drinks matcha at Starbucks, that matcha latte? Yeah, I know. I now turn to scooters. But anyways, guys, there's so much written. I with all the information that we've given you tonight, this seriously, if you haven't realized, this really is our opportunity to save souls. And it's happening, guys. It's happening through art. And it's going to keep happening with the tea ceremony art once we can just get this information out there. We need your support to just share it on social media. We do have a website. It is thesamuraisaint.com. Guys, I don't think we have time for question and answers. Okay, we got a QR code up there too. But I don't think we have time for question and answers. Guys, drop us an email on that QR. Please, 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 please. And then also we do got matcha back there for sale. If we can and we move quickly, and then I've got my cleanup crew too that we're trying to get out of here quickly. We're going to throw the trash away, move the tables back. But Yoko is actually willing to do a really quick small tea ceremony, just like on the Karate Kid Part 2, if you haven't seen that. She's going to do the napkin thing. She's going to let her hair down, yada, yada, yada. So please, if you can help us out. Not only that, I'd love to give St. Basil's the Great a donation, guys, because the Father has been incredible to us. He really has. He's a silent guy, but he's been a really, really good guy to us. All right? So without further ado, again, get the QR code. Send us a line. If you have any questions or any ideas for us, we are all open for it. And then again, nothing moves unless really the bucks. All right? And we got wonderful things. Yes.
You want to end in this?
Oh, yes. So
this, prayer, man.
Yeah, this is a prayer. My glasses. Chris, you got glasses. I don't got glasses. I'm 50 years old, man. I know I don't look like it. And I'm probably shocking a lot of people because they've known me for a while. Now I'm just giving out my real age. I know. I can't even read it. Where's the light? I need a light. I need a light really quick. And we'll end in this. Guys, we got prayer cards. Please take them. Take them. But we also have a donation box right by him. We've got keychains in the back with Kusto Takayama as well. We also have things for free that are back there. I forget what else. All right, but anyways, let's go ahead and end this. All right, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Oh God, in your wonderful providence, you have chosen Blessed Justo Takayama, Ukon, to be a singular promoter of your kingdom, an undaunted witness to the Catholic faith. Reward, we beseech you, his zeal for your glory, and gracious grant us the intercession. Grant us also that following his example, we may bravely beat Catholic Christ our Amen.